drawing from limited channels, and most of the channels can't produce what it is that we're calling forth to come through those channels. See, and when they don't produce what it is that we're calling for in our humanness, what we tend to do is to work harder, push harder, pull harder, as if that's going to change something. Several weeks ago in class, I told the story about the fly in the window. And this fly is buzzing like crazy, trying to get out. And he keeps beating himself up against the window pane or the screen, just trying to get out of the window because he can see his freedom. He just can't get to it. And as his efforts to get out fail, he just pushes harder and harder and harder, and he begins to buzz louder and louder and louder. How many of you have seen this happen? Yeah. Now, if you've ever watched a fly trying to get out through a closed window, then you realize how futile those efforts are, don't you? Because that pathway that he's taking, that channel that he's taking, is not going to yield the results that he's calling for. See, and the fly ends up dying on the windowsill. But it's not because he didn't work hard. See, it wasn't because he didn't work hard, because he was doing everything he could to get out. It was just that the channel that he was trying to use would not yield the freedom that he was calling for. Now, of course, you know, all of us know that this is a parable, isn't it? And it's not just about a fly, is it? It's about all of us. See, it's about every single one of us, and it's about the things that we do in our humanness when we can see our good right before us, and yet somehow we just can't get to it. And of course, the moral to the story for both the fly and for us is that rather than to continue to try harder and harder and push harder and harder or pull harder and harder for something that simply is unyielding, then maybe we want to consider to take another route. Take another route. Now, I read this story in a book called U Squared, which Reverend Mary Jo loaned to me. But what was interesting to me was that about 3 years before I ever read this story, I wrote this story. And the only difference in my story and this one was it was a fly trying to get out of a screen window, and this one was one that was trying to get out of a glass window. But it was the same story. Okay? And now once I got beyond the surprising coincidence that, wow, isn't that something? This guy and I wrote the same story. We witnessed the same story. Once I got beyond that, I had to ask myself the logical question. Exactly where was I mimicking the antics of the fly? See, coincidence doesn't show up for nothing. You know, there's something we need to do with that coincidence. How was I mimicking what this fly was doing? How was I doing that in my own life? Where was I beating up against a wall that just simply wasn't yielding? And where did I just say, well, then I'll just keep beating and I'll beat harder and I'll push harder? Yeah. And where was it necessary in my life at that point of asking that question? Where is it necessary for me to consider another route? Okay? And what I realized as I was thinking about this is that up until that point, my entire focus had been on believing that my desires were possible. And then also believing that I deserved my good. Okay? That's where my entire focus had been. So it wasn't really that my belief was lacking. It was that it wasn't complete. See, because I realized that I was attempting to draw my desires through a channel that couldn't support them, rather than realizing that what I was calling for originates from a source that knows no limits. Not only does it know no limits, it knows no contingencies. Not only does it know no contingencies, it knows no time. Not only does it know no time, it knows no exceptions. Okay? I was caught up in a limited channel trying to squeeze it through this rather than demanding it from my source that gives me everything I need. Getting out of the way and not being so caught up in how. See, and when we move to that space, when we get out of the way that it's going to come, the how that it's going to show up, and recognize that we're dealing with something that is not going to show us how to do it, it's going to reveal to us that it's already done, that changes everything. That changes everything. I mean, we have shifted in that moment. It doesn't need to happen anymore. I don't have to figure out how it's going to happen anymore. It has happened. It has been given. It has been provided. We think from that space, and man, everything changes. Everything is different. Everything feels different. We are so free. See, an infinite source whose only concept of time is now. Wow. An infinite source that creates everything out of itself and doesn't need a contingency for it to come through. It doesn't need anything to happen first. An infinite source whose ability it is to produce our good right here and right now and to go beyond any reason that we have told ourselves that it can't happen. In any area where we've made ourselves an exception, that infinite source is saying to us, no, I'm greater than that too.